Hey everybody, it's Tuesday, April 22nd, 2025. Welcome to the NFL Fantasy Football Podcast, where the waiting is the hardest part. It's me, your man, MG Marcus Grant, joined by Michael F. Florio and Laquan Jones. What is it, guys? Two more sleeps?
Oh, thank God.
Yeah.
I need to hear one more. I'm ready to get this over with.
Let's just move. Let's just get it over with, man.
Am I the only one on this show that's excited? I can't wait for Thursday night.
I'm excited for the draft. I'm tired of all this other just noise and chatter.
I'm excited to get it over with. That's where I'm excited at. Let's get it here and let's get it done.
Let's do this. 'Cause everybody's just trying to, everybody's hot taking now to try to get the biggest take out there. Speaking of which, we have a guy who gets accused of hot taking, but generally, more often than not, he is on point. We are having our yearly visit with Emory Hunt, he of the Football Game Plan. His draft guide is out now. We've had him, on the show 4 or 5 years in a row, I think, at this point.
Yeah.
And there's always a couple of guys that he breaks from consensus with, and a lot of people give him a hard time, say he's a hot take artist, but Emory's got receipts, man. He ends up being way right.
It's hilarious because you could ask Emory, give me a player that people are lower on, and he'll start pulling out D3 linemen, and you're like, what? Right. I meant a third round guy. But
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we will get into him. I'm sure we will ask him about small school guys, and I'm sure he will give us a name that we have not only never thought of, but probably didn't even know, had never even heard of until today. That is the beauty of having Emory Hunt on, so stick around for that. In the meantime, a couple of news headlines to dive into. We'll start in Indianapolis, where Colts general manager Chris Ballard says he expects both Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones to play at some point this season.
Yikes.
Yikes. Look, I know we've been trying to hang on to Anthony Richardson and his fantasy relevance. We want him to be a runner. We hope that he can develop as a passer. But Florio, at this point, we've seen him get benched. Now they bring in Daniel Jones, and there's talk that Daniel Jones is going to see some playing time. At what point do we just have to give up the rope, let go of the rope on Anthony Richardson?
I think at this point he is nothing more than an upside QB2 that probably not even going to be top 15 in most people's fantasy rankings, but the upside is very high because of what you said, Marcus, what he does as a runner. But I'm going to take shots at the Colts the same way I did in season. This is dumb. I understand you have to plan to have your backup quarterback play because of injuries, especially with Richardson, all of that. But when you drafted Anthony Richardson, you knew he was a 21-year-old kid that had attempted 215 passes in college. Now, 2 years through his NFL career, 176 pass attempts. You know what he needs more than anything? Reps and opportunity. And you knew that when you drafted him. So give him those reps and give him those opportunities, and don't waste them by giving half of them in camp to Daniel Jones. Look, if Jones plays because Richardson flames out in the first half of the season or he gets hurt or something like that, sure. But you should be giving Anthony Richardson every opportunity he needs to grow, because when you took him, that was the plan.
It feels like, Laquan, this is a decision that's made. The Colts have this idea that they are a contender, right? And I get it. The AFC South is not particularly strong. They were 8-9 last year. They were just a couple of games out of the division title. But LQ, they're not truly a contender in the AFC, right? Well, you still have to deal with the Bills and the Ravens and, the Chiefs and, whoever else. Why don't they just, to Florio's point, just let him play, let him grow? Because, the worst thing that could happen to them is you are 10-7 and you get bounced in the first round of the playoffs, and then what do you do?
I think they honestly just want to put a good product out there. And I see why they're rushing kind of the process of Anthony Richardson, because it has not been pretty. It has been very, very bad. The completion percentage, dear God, 49%. Tapping on the helmet and getting out, dear God, that looks bad for a franchise quarterback. So you bring in Daniel Jones, and it's all right, well, we kind of have an idea what Daniel Jones has been these last 2 seasons, but there's that 2022 season that everybody's holding on to. Daniel Jones looked pretty good that season with the medium floor of throwing 3,200 yards, but he didn't turn the ball over much. He ran for 700 yards. These are all things that they kind of want Anthony Richardson to be right now. And if you have any type of hope that Daniel Jones comes in as a starter, he has weapons around him. They're still going to be able to pick one of these tight ends that everybody's mocking him to have complete weapons around Daniel Jones. That's all we wanted in New Jersey for when he was at the Giants, is a complete set of weapons. And if we look at that 2022 season, he was great at the deep ball. You have Alec Pierce to be the deep threat. You have Michael Pittman, that we have not seen the absolute best from him, but he is the wide receiver one. You have an absolute dog in Josh Downs, and I hope the world catches up to this, of him operating out of that slot being disgusting. So I honestly feel like they are making these comments because Daniel Jones actually has a chance to be a starter. And also, one more point. In 2022, he was QB9. So I'm going to be taking those shots for Daniel Jones living in those deep darks of pits of HELL hockey sticks and the ADP, just for the upside, because the rushing upside is there. The deep ball is there. They have the weapons. They have a running game. I don't know. It might be Daniel Jones' season this year.
No team has ever thought Daniel Jones was the guy and been wrong.
Thank you for jumping in, because I didn't have words. You're trying to get me excited about a bowl of oatmeal. I mean, like, his best season. All right, I mean, maybe that's what it is. His best season was slightly better than mid. He threw 15 touchdowns that year.
Yeah.
15.
But
that ain't great, man.
It ain't great either.
And we're talking about these two guys who at best are mid, sharing time, both being part-time players.
But which one has that untapped potential, and which one is a proven, you've had 6 years as a starter and it did not work out, and the other guys had 6 games pretty much. Like,
no, and I get your point, right? I totally get your point about Anthony Richardson, but I feel like for us, right, in fantasy, like, I don't want to touch either of these guys because of what the Colts are telling us. Like, the Colts are telling us that they're not in fully on Anthony Richardson. So if they're not fully in, like, I'm not going to spend a draft pick on a guy who's going to be a rotational quarterback, it seems like.
Yeah. I think they pull the plug early on Anthony Richardson, and that's going to be the sad truth of this, of like where you don't draft Anthony Richardson, even though that upside is magnificent. Like, we all know what it can be, but it's not what it is, you know? So it's one of those things, like, feel bad for Josh Downs. You feel bad for Michael Pittman because the uncertainty of who's going to be the quarterback.
Yeah. I mean, in the end, they are doing Anthony Richardson a disservice by not really giving him the full chance to develop. And
they might win 7 games with Daniel Jones, you know, like.
But he'll rush for 700 yards and have 15 touchdowns and be a top 10 for fantasy.
He's not the better runner of the two. Like.
No, absolutely not. No.
It's just so bad. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
I want better for Anthony Richardson.
Chris Ballard, if you're listening, give him a shot. That's all we're asking. Just give him another shot.
The Colts would have gave up on Josh Allen after 2 years.
Good luck. Other young quarterback news. Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota says J.J. McCarthy has no limitations at the start of the offseason program. I mean, Laquan, all signs seem to be pointing to J.J. McCarthy being the Vikings starter when it comes to week 1. I'm not saying I'm out on him. I just feel like he's so much of an unknown that besides Justin Jefferson, it makes me unsure of what to do with Vikings players.
I mean, Vikings completely opposite of what Indy's saying about their starting quarterback, but more so looking at JJ, I love the confidence that this team is putting around him. And honestly, they have a great system over there, and it worked for Sam Darnold. And like, I think we always forget, you know, what we were thinking going into the season. If it was JJ, if it was Sam Darnold, we were getting a discount Justin Jefferson. If this is what's going to happen again in the fantasy streets, please let it happen, because I'll take it. I know you guys are on TJ Hawk. He's going down in ADP. He's living in that, you know, question of where does he go? But I could see him being great, being good for you guys, because I'm not at that. You know where I'm at. It's like, I'm not touching them. But you have all these players that might get discounted, like the Aaron Joneses, the Jordan Masons, Jordan Addison. Like, okay, let's just keep what it is. You guys are going to be a little hesitant on him, but I'm loving the confidence. Like, they're going to have like a villain arc with him, man. Like, I think he's going to come out and just ball out and shut everybody up, because you see the confidence that this franchise is putting behind him. So I'm going to be buying into it.
I mean, Florio, I'm not, like I said, I'm not out on JJ McCarthy. I don't hate him. it's just an incomplete, I guess. It's sort of a black box, like, because he was a winner at Michigan on field. They won games, but they also didn't ask him to do a ton. So I'm just not sure what to get out of him. And that's the reason, at least for me, that I'm just sort of hesitant on Vikings players.
No, I totally get that, because whether you believe in JJ or not, like he's an unproven at this level, and that always adds risk into these players, especially someone like Jefferson, who you need to take top 5, top 3 overall in a lot of drafts. So it adds some risk there. I kind of am at the point where I trust KOC and the Vikings brass. Like, he has a very fantasy friendly system. He's got arguably one of the best sets of weapons in the NFL. I think you can make that argument. And Sam Darnold had a career year with him. Kirk Cousins was putting up numbers with him. But then there was that stretch 2 years ago at the end where it was like Josh Dobbs and Nick Mullins, and those guys were putting up numbers for a stretch with KOC. So JJ is not a player like I'm looking to draft, but I do think he is one that could be like a fun late round dart throw or waiver wire name in season. And there'll be weeks where you could stream him in good matchups and stuff, but yeah, for me, it's just trusting this system and the playmakers around him more than trusting him himself.
Yeah. I think if you're playing Dynasty, if you're playing best ball, like, you've got to kind of stake a claim one way or another. You decide whether you're in or out. For those of us who play redraft, you can take more of a wait and see approach. You can sit back, hands off this year, see what happens, and then come back again in 2026 and take a shot at JJ McCarthy. But we'll keep an eye on that too as we get a little bit closer to training camp and the start of the season. Very happy to be joined here on the NFL Fantasy Football Podcast by a guy we consider a friend of the show for sure at this point. We like to talk to him every year right about this time, just before the draft. You know him probably from social media on F-Ball Game Plan. You see him on CBS Sports Network. He is the owner and creator of the Football Game Plan himself, and a man who has probably forgotten more about college and pro football than some of us will ever know. That is the one and only Emory Hunt. Emory, always good to talk to you. Great. You just stepped off of television. You have us feeling underdressed, but it's always great to have you hanging out with us, man.
Hey, man, I'm glad to be on the show as always. It's a yearly thing for us, and excuse my presence. You know what I'm saying? Normally I'll come here. Excuse my presence.
Well, the Football Game Plan guide is out. Glad to be perusing through it once again, as always. So definitely want to get you on and pick your brain about what you think on some of these prospects, as we're a couple days away from the draft. And want to start at quarterback, right? Because that more than likely is where the draft is going to begin. That's sort of certainly for fantasy football where the conversation has begun. The top two at the class for most people, Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. You have Shedeur Sanders over Cam Ward, even though he looks like the consensus to go number one. What puts Shedeur ahead of Cam Ward for you? And ultimately, what is Sanders' ceiling for you?
It's funny because if you're watching Shedeur Sanders, and I cover a lot of FCS football, so I've seen his first game, which was an upset win over FAMU in the Orange Blossom Classic in a torrential downpour. They won that game 7-6. And that was my first exposure to him as a quarterback, because I hadn't seen his high school games, and it just I don't know what to expect. But I was impressed that season with how he played the position from the neck up. And when you combine his play from the neck up with what he does from a touch, timing, anticipation, and accuracy perspective, man, he's plug and play. He's exactly what they want. And what was cool about his freshman season, 30 touchdown passes inside the red zone, no interceptions. So for someone that people say gets sacked a lot or takes a lot of sacks, you think he have a ton of fumbles. He doesn't. You think he have a ton of interceptions. He doesn't. And he has way more touchdowns than interceptions in that regard as a whole. And we've seen him time and time again just play well in the situation. Third down offense, backed up offense, red zone offense, in the game offense, need to have it situations. Like he is the most pro-ready prospect since Andrew Luck for all of the things I mentioned, on top of the fact that he has a Hall of Fame dad that has prepared him for the spotlight. He was trained by Tom Brady and Jeff Blake and Troy Aikman. So, this guy can step in right now, and he has gone to 2 downtrodden programs in Jackson State and Colorado and led those guys to bowl games to new heights.
And looking at some other QBs, Emory, You have Jaxson Dart at QB7. A lot of people have him as the QB3 in this class, and Tyler Shough is getting hyped now maybe as a first-round pick. You have him as your QB23, so what do you see differently than everyone else who is seemingly a lot higher on these two?
For Dart, you could tell who started to watch Jaxson Dart at the bowl game against Duke, and based off social media, the one pass he threw, because if they watched him during the season, they would have seen that Florida game when he threw 3 American interceptions in the last 2 minutes with Ole Miss's playoff berth on the line. So can you imagine if Shedeur or Cam had a game like that with the playoffs on the line and they throw 3 picks in 2 minutes? We would never see the light of day of that game, right? And so Jaxson Dart is a good player. I think he needs a little bit more time because of coming out of that Ole Miss offense. And we've seen this before with Matt Corral. We're seeing Matt Corral go through the ups and downs and adjustments in the UFL, having to deal with pressure quickly, having to deal with things changing post-snap as of what he saw pre-snap. And that's the issues I saw with Jaxson Dart. When the first threat is taken away, then things start to get muddy, and then he doesn't handle pressure well. We saw that on the first series or two against Georgia before the backup came in, led him for a touchdown. Then Dart came back in and started to have a really good game. So that worries me about Dart. I think he's more of a day 2 guy that needs help. And Shough, I remember just last year when everybody was worried about guys being 23 and 24. So now we're okay with a dude that it's funny. Everybody last year was worried about Michael Penix's age and injury history. And this year, we have somebody that's in his 7th year of college that has only been healthy this past season that's also 27 years old. Like, what are we doing? So I think he's on the day 2, day 3 type trains. Your QB2 that can help you in a 2 to 3 game pinch.
Now let's shift to some of these running backs, man. I mean, the consensus out there, the fantasy streets, everybody's all excited about Ashton Jeanty. Is he immune to landing spots?
I'm glad you brought up Ashton Jeanty because he is my RB1. I don't see that as much of a drop-off between him and also Emory and Hampton, who I have as an RB2. And if somebody had TreVeyon Henderson as their RB1, I wouldn't bat an eye because I like all the parts about his game. But I feel like right now we're in the midst of the one-upmanship of Ashton Jeanty. He had gone from a first-round pick to top 15 to top 10 to now we're seeing people may trade up to 2 to get him. Like, so at some point we're approaching that area where are we overrating him? I do think he's more of a gap scheme guy than a outside zone guy. I think he's more downhill than he is east and west. Because if you've seen, in certain games, if teams beat him to the spot, they're able to, corral him and get him on the ground because he doesn't have that cutback ability. I know people will show one highlight of him cutting back, but the difference when you're grading these prospects is how consistently are you doing that one thing, right? And that's what lowers the tier for some guys or lower the levels down for some guys. I think he's a very good back. Again, RB1 breaks an enormous amount of tackles that you just can't even explain. But I also feel like he will be a part of a tandem. I don't think he's a quote-unquote foundational guy.
Emory, we are a Cam Skattebo friendly podcast. He's a guy that we all like here. But I will concede that he's also sort of a hard guy to evaluate, right? Because he didn't really pop until that final year at Arizona State. He was a transfer from Sacramento State. There are a lot of things to like. There are a lot of things to sort of question. When you look at Cam Skattebo, I mean, what do you think of him? And is he closer to his ceiling than to his floor? How much more room does he really have to develop?
I think that's a great question. I think he is what we see. And so you're going to get what you just saw from Cam Skattebo. The lateral agility, I think he has better lateral agility than Ashton Jeanty. The difference is we've seen Jeanty like finish games and finish runs and do all of those things you want to see. Skattebo has been banged up a little bit. It takes on too much contact, as does Jeanty. I think Jeanty may be a little bit faster, much more explosive out the blocks. So you worry about the quote-unquote long speed. But Skattebo, to me, is a starting tailback. In the same mold, if you're talking about Jeanty as a combo guy, Skattebo could be the same thing, which is why we tend to say this draft class is deep. Like, and it's not just deep in terms of like, hey, the top 8 backs. I'm talking about like the line goes down the hall type deep of guys that we're not even talking about, of guys that can be starters that we end up finding on day 3. So I'm a Cam Skattebo guy. I like that we saw him put the whole display of his skill set out there on film. in All-Star. In the playoff game, the receiving skills, the downfield threat. But I do feel like he's going to have to learn to evade a little bit more as a pro than he did at Arizona State.
And when you were talking about Jeanty, you said you wouldn't bat an eye if someone has Henderson up high. I love Henderson. I fall in that like hive of his, but Quinshon Judkins also has a hive of his own. So if we're pitting two teammates against each other, which one do you like more?
I like Henderson a little bit more because Henderson pass pro is phenomenal, and that's going to get him on the field early. And that also yields to him being a very good receiver, explosive, game-breaking speed. And to this year, he put together the vision because I thought last year he missed some opportunities where he was like, wow, why did he hit that particular gap? Or the cutback was right there. What was he, seeing? This year he saw it better and tied all of the parts of his game together perfectly. For Judkins, and I don't know if this is a byproduct of him playing in a tandem to where I need to eat now. I don't know what my next meal is going to be, or in the sense of the running game, I don't know what my next carry is going to be. So I got to make sure I make them keep me out there. And I think that's why his patience wasn't where it needed to be. At times you saw him beat the pulling lineman around the court. Like, nah, you got to wait, let that set up, and then you explode through. So I think his patience is where he's going to have to work on. And I think that ties to him having to work in a tandem, not knowing when your next carry is going to come because you're not the leadoff guy. You're not the foundational guy. And I think that affects a back's ability to stay patient because you want to show that you should be out there long term.
And you said there's a line down the hall of running backs in this class, and you scouted over 1,200 players total in this class. So are there any running backs you find yourself a lot higher on than consensus?
This is how you know folks watch football in October and some watch football in February. Because remember when everybody was talking about Kaleb Mullins out of Michigan, the big running back, that linebacker turned running back, and his teammate Donovan Edwards? Like, these are two really good backs. Like, and they have gone forgotten about. Ollie Gordon rushed for 1,700 American yards last year, and people just forgot about running the football. There was one game in particular I'm watching Ollie Gordon. It was a Utah game, and the quarterback turns around and hands him the ball. Now, as a running back, I've been in a situation where you see what the quarterback does because his head is turned, handing you the ball. You're like, bro, everybody behind you has a red helmet on. We wear orange and brown. Like, they literally didn't block nobody. And so for Gordon, we know he has explosiveness. We know he's a very good downfield threat as a receiver. And this is somebody you can get on in rounds, 4 through 7 on day 3 that ends up being a starter. And so I think there's backs that we're not even discussing that go even further. Kyle Monangai out of Rutgers. All of these backs that we'll see earn some ticks and perhaps some starts as pros and be fantasy relevant by the back end of the season.
So you talk about being fantasy relevant. So I have this thing. I mean, look, Marcus and Florida, they're going to look at me kind of crazy, but I have this thing against Kaleb Johnson. Like, I think he's a product of how good Iowa's O-line was last season, but there's no wiggle to his game when I watch him. There is no juke you out of your socks. So I need you to check me because you my boy and you're going to keep it honest. Like, am I too low on Kaleb Johnson? And does landing spot actually matter where he goes this season?
It's funny you bring him up, man. I'll tell you this Kaleb Johnson story. I remember, and this is my philosophy the whole time. Like, during the season, I'm an NFL analyst and a college football analyst. I don't dive into the drafts up until, postseason when I'm not calling games on Saturdays and I'm on the road at the All-Star game circuits. So this just so happened to be, I saw Twitter talking about Kaleb Johnson, so I already assumed this guy must not be good if Twitter's talking about him that much. Right? So I'm like, all right, I had a rare, I was getting ready for this game on Saturday, so I checked into the hotel, and it was a rare Friday night Big Ten game, and it just so happened to be Iowa versus UCLA, and I was like, you know what, let me check out this Kaleb Johnson dude everybody talking about. I probably picked the worst game to see him first because they literally had him in witness protection program. Like, he was in crisis the whole game. I'm like, man, this the dude they talking about? Like, so and then, watch him more when I was studying him. I put in my scout notes, he doesn't go broke making a profit because he always falls forward. If the lane is there, he'll hit it. And I remember, because I know the other talk was how he's super fast. And I was like, now you can clearly see he's not fast. But he's consistent, right? And I was grading this Illinois State edge rusher. And when I say, so obviously I'm going to watch the Iowa game because they played Iowa. And I'm like, wow, this play was blocked so perfectly. It was almost like, the lumbar seal here and a seal here. Like they blocked everybody. And he had nothing. The last time he got touched was in the huddle. You know what I'm saying? There was nobody on the right side. So I was like, oh, yeah, if you're going to block everybody, he has a clear lane. Of course, he's going to have long runs. But I kind of compare his game to Brian Robinson of Washington, where if you beat him to the spot, there's no wiggle, there's no elusiveness, and that could cause a problem. So he can be a perennial guy that averages like 4.3 yards a carry, which ain't bad. But at the end of the day, you're going to always look for someone to bring you a little bit more juice out the position.
So I'll say this. You talk about watching Kaleb Johnson against UCLA. For whatever reason, the Bruins just had this talent to just ugly up a game on both sides. And that's not just me being a USC homer, just watching them objectively. Like there was no such thing as an aesthetically pleasing UCLA football game. That's just what they did.
Exactly. Because during that game, you watch, first of all, anytime they were the throwbacks, they really about to mess the game up. You have a DN wearing 18, linebacker wearing 49, catching interceptions. Like, oh, this game is ugly. Like, it's out of control.
Want to kind of turn our attention as we talk to Emory Hunt about some of these pass catchers and that have you. But I did want to ask kind of one general question here, because we sort of got into it when you were talking about Tyler Shough and the quarterbacks. Do we make too much of a prospect's age? I know that's a big deal for people who are scouting, especially in fantasy, if you're playing Dynasty, what have you. It seems like it's a bad thing until it's not. Do we get too hung up on that?
It depends. It depends on the prospect, and it depends on the position and situation. And your expectation has to taper a little bit, because the biggest question you have about age is upside. Like, how much better can this guy get? Or is this guy hit his ceiling already? Because we start to see guys get better in year 2 or 3 in the NFL. And that normally would have put them in the age range of 23, 24, right? With more room to grow. But if you're entering the league at 24, 25, at 28, now we kind of expect your skills to kind of decline a little bit. Mm-hmm. If we think about some of these receivers that had been on the move, Brandon Cooks was standing because he's always on the move. But if you think about these receivers that have been on the move, they're around that age that some of these guys are starting to come into the draft. So if you are, I say this, if you are ridiculously fast, you got a little bit more long runway. But if you're a possession guy coming in as an older player, you better play special teams, and you better do something else. Otherwise, you may not get drafted, or you may get drafted late, even though you may be a very good football player.
Yeah, when I worked in baseball, they used to always say, if you're 22, you're a prospect. If you're 25, you're kind of a suspect. That was the way they kind of looked at it a little bit.
Oh my God. Well, I want to ask you about Iowa State's duo of their wide receivers, man, because honestly, I just need to know if they're going to be any type of fantasy relevance from Jaylin Noel and Jayden Higgins. Like, these two guys, when I watched them, you have Noel that runs out of that slot, very quick in his routes and be able to break and create that separation. Higgins, to me, I feel like he could adjust very well when that ball's thrown or misthrown in his direction. But are these guys somebody that fantasy managers should be looking out for, especially this week with the draft coming up?
Great question, because I feel like if we're looking at them and how I tend to grade these guys by position, Noel slot, Higgins more that big inside guy. I think it's easier for slot guys to be fantasy relevant because the game happens quicker for them, especially someone like Noel that has the ability to play inside or outside, right? So I like how he has the ability to break a game open with the ball in his hands, has a great sense of timing. You go back to the Iowa game, his big play down the sideline. He had a really good game against Kansas in a game they ended up losing, but he got them back in the ball game. For Higgins, I think he has to be one of those guys that you call plays for, right? Where, okay, we're going to work him over this particular quadrant of the field. We're going to single up him versus him. And it's tough to find a team where, to me, if you're going to do that, you got to take him high in the draft. So I can see Noel being way more fantasy relevant based off his position, his skill set, and his versatility. I don't think we can see the same crossover ability for Higgins more so than Noel.
So I'm way too high on Higgins. Got it. Noted.
A lot depends on that. Like, it depends on, for a guy like Higgins, it really depends on landing spot for a guy like Noel, it doesn't depend on landing this spot, if that makes sense.
No, yeah, I think so. And Emory, I know you like Travis Hunter a lot. I know you like Tetairoa McMillan a lot. But after the top two guys in the class, are there any wide receivers that you find yourself a lot higher on than some of these other guys who are going around talking about draft all week?
I would say Jack Beck. I'm a big fan of. I kind of got lost in the shuffle. I forgot where Jack Besh. I forgot where he ended up. He was at LSU, and then next thing you know, we started to see Malik Neighbors and other receivers. And Brian Thomas, like, I remember they had this other dude, and it was like I just couldn't figure out where he went. Then he pops up on TCU's. I'm like, oh, that's a dude from LSU. And so I'm glad he had the career he had on the back end of his TCU time, and at the Senior Bowl, to where we saw him and could project forward. Okay, he could probably be an inside or outside guy. So I like his game. I like how he plays. And I think he has a bright future. Even his teammate, J.P. Richardson, was a stud at Oklahoma State. You kind of remember, I remember they had this receiver that was a slot guy, and next thing you know, he's at TCU too. And so that's another one. And I think Kobe, what's his name? His name is Kobe something, plays at UCF. And he was Hudson, Kobe Hudson. If he had better quarterback play at UCF, people will realize how good this dude is. Because he was at the Hula Bowl, and you got reminded how good he was because of the quarterback play wasn't, bad like it was at UCF. It was consistent. So we saw the guy that was able to go up above the rim, went over the middle of the field, just like those two Florida receivers, Shamiri Dike and also Elijah Badger. Badger has running back in his background, so you can utilize him in a multitude of ways. Also as a kick returner, has that experience, and Dike has the speed to really get deep down the field. We saw both guys kind of blossom a little bit more so when they opened up the playbook, when they put in their quarterback, DJ Lagway, when he took over for the injured Graham Mertz.
I want to ask you real quick about Travis Hunter, because obviously he's one of the headliners in this thing. For real football, it seems real exciting that he might play both ways, and I know that's what he wants to do. For fantasy, it's a little bit scary to think this dude's going to play 50, 60 snaps on defense and then maybe play on offense. What is his future? Does he actually end up playing both sides of the football in the NFL?
I think he does. And it's a great question about fantasy, because if you're talking about fantasy, it's like, man, I don't know where do you take a Travis Hunter, right? Because here's the thing. When you have him on defense as a corner, as a quarterback, why are you throwing his way? Because you're literally throwing to a wide receiver. So do not throw his way. And so, yes, he can start on defense. And because of the pace of play of the NFL game, he's going to see less snaps in the pros than he would in college, because he could start at corner, and let's say he's at wide receiver. He's probably number 3. So there's 25 snaps out of a slot position, and him being out there, they're going to try to bracket him. So that leaves everybody else one-on-one with an opportunity to make a play. Or if they leave him singled up, you get him the football and he's able to return, make things happen after the catch. And we haven't really seen this part kind of untapped, which we could potentially see as a pro. He's so good with the ball in his hands, he may even return punts, because at the end of the day, that's where he was getting his break in college. So he's playing 120 snaps. He's only going to see 60 snaps total in the pros. But from a fantasy perspective, I don't know how can you gauge where to take him, because who's going to feature Travis Hunter, the receiver, right? And that's the other part that you kind of worry about, which it will be interesting with his, I'm about to use a fantasy term to show I'll be paying attention, his ADP. Where would his ADP be? If that would be interesting to watch, because where do you take a guy that you don't know is going to play, or how much he's going to play on offense?
When I start questioning the guy's ADP and questioning how much he's going to be on the field, I ultimately just fade every single time. I'm not even going to look that way. I'm good. I ain't losing sleep over it. And you know what? On to next year. But I want to ask you about, not the consensus wide receiver 1, Tetairoa McMillan. I mean, honestly, he's coming in with a chip on the shoulder, because we honestly say, well, Travis Hunter is the best wide receiver in this class. But since he goes both ways, I guess it could be Tetairoa. But more so looking at, with the recent viral video going around, are you questioning his love for football? And does he fit as a wide receiver 1 for a team need, maybe like the Panthers or a team like Jaguars, where he could be a contributor as a wide receiver 2?
I like him as a wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2. I think people are underestimating his run after the catch skills. He's 6'5", fluid athlete. Body is built like a swimmer, but he does have the ability to get in and out of his breaks, in and out of his transitions. He's making moves while consistently moving downhill. So he's a fluid athlete. And man, just the leaping ability and ability to make the thing happen after the catch is crazy. And in fact, I would probably boost his stock up higher based off that video. Because who knows if somebody if somebody asks me something random when I just don't want to be bothered, I am likely to give any answer. So I respect that. Like, yeah, I don't even watch film. You know what I'm saying? I'm just nice. Like, you know what, man? Get this guy on my football team. I like that attitude. Right? So that stuff doesn't matter to me because we don't know the context. But just a football player that can play inside or out at that height, give me that guy 10 times out of 10.
And is there any receiver you think is receiving too little hype? And more importantly, you can put your hater hat on if you want. Who's receiving too much hype?
I gotta tap into February football, man, because apparently this is where all the action happens, right? Matthew Golden, watching him during the season, peerless route runner, just graceful body control, can make every catch. And it was like, this is a solid receiver, man. This is a really good receiver that pairs well with Isaiah Bond, who's clearly faster. But then he runs this 4.2. And listen, tip your cap to Matthew Golden. I would draft him based off this alone. If I ever ran a 4.2 and you question whether or not it was legitimately, you would never see me run another 40-yard dash.
Like Seinfeld.
Exactly. Like, no, it's documented. I ran 4.29. Live with it, right? Even though it doesn't look 4.29. But the paper says I ran 4.29. I just think that, and this the part that frustrates me because we talk about Tetairoa McMillan being wide receiver 1, and then all of a sudden this guy runs his 40, and now people just say, oh yeah, he's wide receiver 1. Is it because his tape? If you had this take in October, I would respect it because it's like, okay, yeah, well, you had that take, even though you saw something that we didn't see. But if it's based off the 40 time, then what are we really doing, right? And so I feel like that is kind of getting a little bit overvalued. And I also feel like Luther Burden is underrated at this point. Coming into the season, he was up there with Travis Hunter in terms of what the scouts thought about this dude as a prospect. And then all of a sudden, he just went unnoticed. Brady Cook, the quarterback, was banged up all throughout the season, but he still produced some very good tape. And I think Burden is going to be a steal wherever he goes in the draft.
Talking about tight ends, Emory, I mean, right now it's Tyler Warren, it's Colston Loveland at the top of the board for a lot of people. Anybody else you think could maybe be a sneaky year one contributor at tight end?
If I'm Gunnar Helm, man, like, bro, where your friends at, dog? Like, bro, do not go out there and run no 40-yard dash on no sprained ankle. Like, then people going to judge you for that. Because if you watched him play, you clearly see him being faster than 4.8. And so, but now people going to, this is why Matthew Golden was genius. Like, because why would I go out there and put something on tape, on paper, that's stamped? And they're going to say, oh, he's a 4.8 guy. Now they're going to drop your stock. Even though they know you're not a 4.8 guy. They know you ran with a sprained ankle, but they know they don't care. They're trying to get you at a cheaper rate. And so I think Gunnar Helm is someone that is criminally underrated during this process. I like Mason Taylor as well. I think he's just a solid, good tight end. He's probably going to be that type to, it's funny because I compared his game to Mark Andrews. Just racks up completions, and if the Jets don't take Tyler Warren at 7, Mason Taylor would be a good get quietly, and would be that Mark Andrews to Justin Fields' offense, and he'll rack up a lot of completions. I also think Brennan Stool out of Clemson, a flex tight end, very good athlete, can get down the field vertical, is another one that has been underrated.
So is there any small school players that you think that could be fantasy relevant that fantasy managers should be jotting down right now?
Lan Larison, the running back out of UC Davis, screams either Kyle Shanahan or Andy Reid type pick. Nearly had 1,000 this past season. Want to say over 1,300 yards rushing and 890 something receiving. And what's cool about him, he spent the first 2 years as a backup, as a kickoff returner, because he had a prolific running back in front of him that didn't get an opportunity to play in the league. But once he took over, he became a stud. And the reason why we didn't see him in any postseason All-Star game circuit was because, he got injured during the playoffs with UC Davis. So now he's getting back to ran 4.5 at his pro day. But this is a tremendous athlete. He glides out there on the field. I think he has a chance to really be one of these small college gems and be fantasy relevant. I would even toss out one of my favorite prospects and stories in the class in Mitchell Van Voren out of St. Norbert, which is a Division III college. He had 1 year of football where he played outside receiver, had 500 yards receiving and 10 touchdowns. And the reason why you asked, like, well, he only had 1 year, that's because he spent the previous 3 or 4 as an all Big East 400-meter hurdler at Marquette. Blew my mind when I found that out, man. It was like, you see this guy 6'4", 250 coming out to the track, you're like, hey, bro, the shot put over there. Like, you know, he's like, nah, I'm here. I'm in lane 5. And he like winning races like, yo, this is crazy. Right? So I saw him at the College Gridiron Showcase. Now I'm glad that he was able to be, prove his worth and athleticism against FBS competition, because that's what you go to the All-Star games for, to get those questions from those small school guys and can they measure up against their upper-level counterparts.
And Emory, you've been breaking down this draft for months now. You're on every single show I see right now talking draft, but we're 2 days away. Is there any draft take that you've been wanting to put out there, but you haven't had the chance to yet? Get it off your chest. If
the Browns do not leave the first round with Shedeur Sanders, send them to the European League of Football. Put the Ryan Fire in the AFC North, man. Because here's what I don't get. You looking at your depth chart and you're seeing it say Joe Flacco and also Kenny Pickett. There's a quarterback that plays like Joe Burrow who happens to be in your division, and his former coach compared Shedeur Sanders to Joe Burrow, and you look at that and you think, nah, we're going to go take somebody else and get man, if you don't take that boy at 2 and go live your life, man, it's crazy. My thing is with Joe Flacco, very good player over the course of his career, right? But people have romanticized Joe Flacco's time in Cleveland. Like, we all saw him throw like 6 picks in that playoff game. Like, what are we talking about? So at the end of the day, take Shedeur Sanders if you're the Browns. I don't care if you don't take him at 2. But, man, you better pull the Houston Texans and do something to get back high enough to what – because if the Giants pass at 3, then, move them and bring the London Monarchs over. Like,
Yo.
So that's my thing. Like, if Shedeur Sanders doesn't leave the first round of the NFL draft as a Brown or a Giant or a Steeler, then the draft is broken.
Well, looking forward to breaking down the Amsterdam Admirals against the Cleveland Browns in the very near future. That should be a whole lot of fun. Emory, dude, we always appreciate it. We always are grateful for the insight. For folks who maybe are uninitiated, where can they find you, man?
Follow me on Twitter at FBallGamePlan. You can see me on CBS Sports HQ during the draft on day 2 and day 3, as well as post-draft on that Sunday as well. And go order the draft guide, guys.
Yes.
Footballgameplan.com/2025 draft guide. And if you have purchased my draft guide since 2020, right now you have over 5,400 individual scouting reports at your fingertips. You would know more about the NFL, CFL, UFL, European League of Football than anybody on your block. And that also, this year we threw together over 50 CFL draft prospects in this draft guide. Because we know a lot of these guys will end up on training camp rosters. Some may even make the team. So it's cool to check out some of these guys that you may not have heard of from schools that you may not have heard of that are on your practice squad. That's why we kind of threw that in there. So this year we had the entire – oh, and I want to say this too, because this is why the draft guide is valuable. Cole Jones, safety out of North Carolina Central, bypassed the NFL draft process. We saw him down LQ at the HBCU Legacy Bowl.
Yeah, he did.
He's in his draft class. He signed with the BC Lions. We got a scout report on him. I looked at other draft guides around. All they had was his height, weight, and name. So there you go. There you have the reason why this is the best one out there.
It's funny. I was looking before you came on. I was looking through all my old files, and I know I got 3 or 4 years worth of draft guides and stuff. So I do feel like I'm, a little bit ahead of a game. So definitely go check it out if you haven't already. Go check it out, and now you can buy back issues too if that's what you want to do. You can go back and get some past issues.
The savvy play would be this, like, because this before I knew my value, right? Mm-hmm. So them first ones was like $10. Then I'm like, man, these things selling like hotcakes. I'm like, hold on. You know what I'm saying? Arrows. Let's up this price to $25 and let's go. But
it still equates to like 5 cents a player, like with the amount of players you have in there.
I learned my lesson. But man, I love keeping at this price point because there's value in having this. Some people may say, why you have so many prospects? Some of these guys don't even play in the NFL. But if they do, you do have a chance to at least get familiar with who it is, and you can make your adjustments, whether you're in a dynasty league or whatever, if this is worth it. But it's always good to have more than less.
Absolutely. And even for at some point, somebody's going to get injured. Some first-year player, second-year player is going to get a call. You can just go back, dive through, see what folks said about him, and kind of get yourself prepared in that regard as well. Go check him out, Emory Hunt, F-Ball Game Plan on Twitter. Go check out the draft guide as well. By the way, we are going to be doing a live stream after round 1 is done as well on Thursday night, so be sure to check us out on the NFL Fantasy YouTube page. We'll be there as soon as they call the name for number 32 in the first round, and we will be on and talk about all the fantasy relevant guys that go in round 1 and kind of get you preview for the weekend as well. In the meantime, that'll do it for this edition of the NFL Fantasy Football Podcast. Stay happy, safe, and healthy, do good, and live well. Enjoy round 1, everybody, and we will talk to you on Thursday night.